I'm Spencer Linton. He is Jerem Jordan. And joining us now for another winning edition of Matich Monday is ESPN's Trevor Matich. Insider, national champion, all-around good man, and certainly a man we assume is celebrating another BYU win, although this one very much in doubt until the last minute. Trevor, how was your weekend, including the BYU football viewership?
Weekend was great. The BYU game was great for reasons that go beyond just the fact that they won the game. I mean, the way that they had true adversity. I mean, this Colorado team has got a lot of good players on it. They gave BYU their best punch. They jumped out to a 14-0 lead. It seems like BYU had no answers, and then BYU came up with the answers. And a lot of that has to do with culture and the way that they just stuck with it. And I love that about this win for BYU because it's easy to blow teams out. It's hard when you're behind the curve and you have to fight your way back. So how do you do that? And I think we saw a lot of BYU's culture in this game.
What did you learn about BYU from the performance?
Well, I learned that they have a lot of great athletes in a lot of places that can make up for deficiencies in other places. I mean, early on, the defense struggled. The offense was battling back, and then the defense tightened up, and different people contributed in different ways at different times, and I love that. But ultimately, it comes down to how do you handle those situations that you don't feel like you're in control of? And this is where we come back to culture. I mean, Kalani Sitake, the head coach, is, I think, a perfect epitome of what he has built, because he's a fullback under Lavelle Edwards, and you look into his eyes and the fire is burning hot. I mean, he is a physical football player at heart. But then he's taken a lot of, I think, mentorship, for lack of a better word, example from Lavelle Edwards, where he truly loves his players. I mean, he loves his players and his assistant coaches, but he holds them accountable to a very high standard. It's hard to do all those things at the same time without one of them becoming overbearing. And you can see that there's a balance of those things, and the players exhibit that on the field. And I think this is one thing that we saw from this particular group of BYU players, that when things went south, you saw the physicality, you saw the love for one another, you saw the accountability for times when guys made mistakes, and they took accountability and they went and they fixed them. And it all added up to a really tough road victory that, to me, was much more satisfying than any other win of this season.
Trevor, we have wondered and speculated about Bear Bachmeier and what he would do when he encounters the inevitable adversity of being down in a tough road game. All of those things happened on Saturday night. So how would you assess his performance given the ramped up pressure in a hostile environment?
The best thing about it, Spencer, was that he filled in gaps. There were parts of the BYU offense that wasn't working, especially the running game. Colorado decided that they were going to limit L.J. Martin and the downhill running back running game, and they were able to limit Martin to a degree in that game. But then Bachmeier picked it up, not just from a running standpoint, but also hitting key passes in key moments. And so this is something that I think is good about him, because you don't know if he's able to do this until after he's in the fire and you see how he responds. Okay, we're not running well over here, so I'm going to run well over there myself, right? The passing game was efficient. It wasn't spectacular, but when they needed to play, they got to play. You know, and I think one of those that probably flies under the radar was in the drive that led up to the game-winning touchdown. They had a 3rd and 17, I think. And so he took off, Bear Bachmeier, took off running, gained 16 of those. That left them 4th and 1. They converted that, and a few plays later, they have the long run for the game-winning touchdown. And so those kinds of plays in moments that they need to be made are plays that Bear Bachmeier is showing himself capable of making, identifying what needs to happen and getting it done. And for such a young player, that kind of poise and that kind of football awareness is not a common thing.
He was awesome. L.J. Martin was effective when used as well. Any concern at the lack of depth behind them at this point, Trevor, given that BYU is a little banged up right now without Sione Moa, conceivably for the next couple of weeks perhaps, and the reliance on Bear Bachmeier to expose himself in the run game because he's good at it, but, you know, you get a little nervous with the high usage rate with the running quarterback.
Yeah, I agree there. He took a lot of hits, and he's willing to take the hits. He talks about how when he steps between the lines, it's all competition. It's competitive all the time. He's going to get every first down, and that's a great attitude. But discretion is a better part of valor at times with quarterbacks because you do get banged up. And there are a lot of quarterbacks over the years in college that run really well early, and then their performance, not just as a runner but as a passer, diminishes later in the season as they take so many hits. But you have to do what you have to do, and they needed him to run to win the game. Unfortunately, he's 220 pounds. You know, the average running back in FBS football is 203 pounds. So he's a big guy that can take more punishment than most quarterbacks can. But in this game, he needed to, because they had 208 yards rushing, but only about 58 of them came from LJ Martin. And part of that was that, the defense will dictate in some ways what you guys do in terms of running the ball and play calling. But Bear Bachmeier made up for that. He was their leading rusher. Receivers made up for that. Cody Hagan and Parker Kingston combined for 3 rushes for over 50 yards between the two of them. Of the 208 yards, about 150 were not running backs. So BYU was able to look at what the defense was doing, what the defense was trying to take away, and make up for that with runs from other positions. And that's one of the great things that we saw about this game, that BYU isn't just a one-trick pony. And if the running backs are being focused on by the defense, well, then the running game isn't going to go. No, the running game was exceptional because there were other guys between quarterback and receivers and the play calling and the creativity that were able to make up for it. So LJ Martin needs to stay healthy, because defenses have to load up the box. They have to focus on him first. So now with Moa out for a while, LJ's got to stay healthy. But at the same time, they've got options, and I think that will help him to stay healthy.
It's a Matich Monday on BYU Sports Nation with ESPN's Trevor Matich. For the first time this season, BYU was, especially in the first quarter, Trevor, exposed. They were put on their heels, and they had to respond. They did, to their credit. Everything we've been talking about credits BYU for finding a way and fighting back and dealing with the adversity. But when I spoke with Kalani Sitake, I could tell he certainly was concerned about some things. So with that on mind, what are you concerned about when it comes to BYU football moving forward if the Cougars are going to keep winning games?
Well, they need to continue to minimize mistakes. Don't feel the punt on the goal line, things like that. Don't drop a pass. Although the guy who dropped the pass actually took responsibility, Chase Roberts, and the quarterback took responsibility for not getting him a ball that was accurate enough. So, I mean, that's actually a good thing. So they could clean up things like that. But the thing is, they're able to make up for some of those mistakes now in ways that are just fascinating to me. One of them is the game-winning touchdown was the reverse tornado, right? And so it was a 32-yard touchdown run by receiver Cody Hagan. So first it was a fake to Parker Kingston to the left. Then LJ Martin faked a run back to the right. Then Hagan came around for a toss back to the left. Well, so he ran over and got a touchdown. Yay. But why was he able to go those 32 yards? Well, Parker Kingston, who took that first fake to the left, led as a blocker down the field and got a block. And then Carson Ryan, tight end, was down there blocking too. But at the 6-yard line, there needed to be one more block in order to spring Hagan for that final 6 yards in order to get the touchdown. And you know who got that block? It was center Bruce Mitchell. He took all 305 pounds of himself and sprinted on down to the 6-yard line from the 32 to throw the final block to spring Cody Hagan for the touchdown. And so there are things that BYU can be better at. But when you talk about execution and effort, and not just effort, but effort doing the right things in the right place in the right way, I think they're all exemplified in that one play, ending with the center running all the way down the field to get the final block in the shadow of the goal line. And so, I want to see them play with even fewer mistakes, because that's how they're going to win. I want to see them enforce their will a little bit better against loaded boxes in the running game with running backs. But at the same time, the fact that they're able to execute in different ways to make up for some of those things is very encouraging. Now, as they continue to improve on some of those things, they'll be that much harder to beat.
Bruce was probably just watching your film, right? You getting down the field as a center?
Yeah, well, I would hope that he would, but I'll tell you what, I thought he took off like a missile, and then I thought, no, it doesn't really look like a missile. It's more of a battleship. But when that battleship got down there, man, he overran anybody that was down there. Well, he didn't actually overrun him; he got in the way, but that was enough. And so, yeah, I tried not to run when I didn't really have to.
Hey, you know your strengths. Let's go. West Virginia coming into town Friday night, pre-conference game, which is always fun. Lavelle Edwards Stadium, always electric. West Virginia coming off a big loss to Utah at home. What are the keys to beat the Mountaineers, in your opinion?
Play cleanly. You know, West Virginia now in the first year with Rich Rod back is a team they're not where they're going to be in a few years, but they were good enough to beat Pitt in the rivalry game. And Pitt's a much better team on paper than West Virginia. And so if everything's clicking with them, they're dangerous and they can hit from every different direction. And I think that the defense can take some lessons as to what happened early in the Colorado game and apply them to West Virginia. Because BYU's defense, very aggressive, Colorado game plan to take advantage of that. And so when aggressive BYU defenders would get upfield too far, they'd hit underneath in the gaps that were formed. When guys would have slants and they slanted out a little too wide, Colorado would use quarterback runs and other kinds of plays to hit those spaces that were created. After that, BYU's defenders, they slowed it down just a little bit and they were more tight in their gaps and their lanes, and that helped to shut down Colorado for most of the rest of the game. And that's one of the things they'll need to do against West Virginia, because Rich Rod excels at game planning against aggressive defenses. You know, he'll have a team that's better able to take advantage of that from a standpoint of personnel as time goes on. But now they're still able to do that to a degree, as evidenced by the Pitt game. So the defense needs to respect what West Virginia can do from a scheme standpoint against what they're doing. And then the offense, once again, needs to enforce their will at the line of scrimmage with LJ Martin and the running backs, regardless of how much West Virginia comes up to stack the box. You know, they'll take advantage of that by hitting other places that become more vulnerable when the box gets extra run defenders. But there will be times this year when BYU will need to see a stacked box and run it anyway, downhill with the running back. And I'd like to see them do that better against West Virginia.
Trevor, after 4 games, or 5 in some instances for some of these Big 12 teams, who are your top 5 teams in the Big 12 right now?
You know, that's a loaded question, because, I mean, you have to say right now Texas Tech, they have the best win at Utah, and they seem to be every bit as good as people thought they'd be, having the second-ranked transfer portal class and the way that they have built up their roster, not just on offense, but huge improvement on the defense. Iowa State is winning a lot of tough, gritty games. BYU is right there, though, because BYU last year had the best defense in the Big 12, and it wasn't close. I mean, they were number 1 in fewest yards and points allowed. BYU led the Big 12 and was one of the top in the nation at most takeaways gained, and that defense seems to be right back up to speed as well. And so as we see the progression of the young quarterback Bear Bachmeier, you'd have to include BYU in that group. But then you've got Arizona State, TCU, Utah still very good. Cincinnati is much better than people think. They're sneaky good. I think they're 3-1 right now, and they're playing very well. Arizona, I believe, is 3-1 right now. So this is going to be a jumble like last year. And remember that 4 teams in the Big 12 finished 7-2, tied for first place, and it was a tiebreaker that sent the 2 that went to the Big 12 championship game. And that's, you know, fan bases would like their team to go dominate and not to have much of a race. But really, it makes the Big 12 one of the most fun conferences in all of college football, because there is such a jumble of teams that are all very good, that all have a chance to get to the Big 12 championship game, and fan bases stay engaged all over the conference all through the entire season. So that's actually a really good thing for the conference. And right now, this is as deep a conference as it was last year.
Trevor, always great to catch up with you and the next level analysis that you bring to this program. It's a wild ride through the Big 12, to say the least. BYU unbeaten for the moment. Can't wait to talk to you again soon. Hopefully discussing a 5-0 BYU next week.
Thanks, Spencer. Thanks, Jaron. Appreciate it, man.
Thanks.